March 17, 1944, 2:47 p.m. Imperial Japanese Naval Intelligence Headquarters, Tokyo. Commander Takeshi Yamamoto stared at the decoded American radio intercept for the third time, his hands trembling slightly. The paper claimed that a single factory in Michigan, Willow Run, had produced 647 heavy bombers in the previous month alone. He calculated quickly, one B-24 Liberator every 63 minutes. His pencil snapped in half. "Impossible," he muttered in Japanese, drawing a thick red X across the document. "American propaganda." Before we continue with Commander Yamamoto's discovery of an industrial reality that would help seal Japan's fate, we need your help to keep these forgotten stories alive. If you're already hooked by what you're hearing, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about real history. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of courage and innovation from World War II. And here's something we love. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your country, your city. We have viewers from Buenos Aires to Berlin, from Manila to Montreal. Are you a veteran? Did your grandfather serve? Do you have a connection to this war? We want to hear from you. Now back to Tokyo, March 1944, where Commander Yamamoto was about to make an intelligence assessment that would prove catastrophically wrong. Yamamoto had reason for skepticism. In Japan, building a single heavy bomber required 45,000 man-hours across 4 months. Master craftsmen hand-fitted each aluminum panel. Engines were individually tuned. Every rivet received personal inspection. The Nakajima Aircraft Company's largest facility in Musashino produced perhaps 12 bombers monthly, and that made them Japan's most efficient manufacturer. The mathematics seemed absurd. If Americans truly completed one B-24 every hour, they built in a single day what Japan's best factory produced in 2 months. Yamamoto filed the report under desinformatia, Russian word for strategic deception his German allies taught him. He'd seen American industrial capacity firsthand during his naval attaché posting in Washington during the 1930s, but this exceeded even American capability. Nobody mass-produced airplanes like automobiles, except someone did. 18 months earlier, 600 miles east of Tokyo, in a rural area outside Ypsilanti, Michigan, a 42-year-old production manager named Charles Sorensen stood in an empty soybean field, watching surveyors stake out the perimeter of something that shouldn't exist, an airplane factory designed by a man who built cars, not aircraft. Sorensen had spent 38 years at Ford Motor Company, rising from pattern maker to Henry Ford's right-hand man. He'd perfected the moving assembly line that revolutionized automobile production in 1913. He understood metal fabrication, workflow optimization, and Frederick Taylor's time-motion studies better than anyone in America. He understood nothing about airplanes. "Mr. Sorensen," said the Army Air Force's procurement officer standing beside him, Major James Browning from Columbus, Ohio. "Mr. Ford's proposal concerns us. Aircraft aren't cars. Each bomber requires skilled aviation mechanics, not assembly line workers." Sorensen lit his pipe, the December wind cold against his weathered face. "Major, in 1908 it took 12 hours to build a Model T. By 1925, we did it in 93 minutes. A B-24 has 550 0 parts. A car has maybe 5 0. That's 310 times more complex, you say? Yes, sir. So give me 310 times more factory. I'll give you 310 times more bombers." The Major smiled politely, the smile of a man humoring an arrogant civilian. "It's not that simple, isn't it?" That conversation happened in December 1940. By January 1941, construction began on what newspapers would call the most enormous room in the history of man. The Willow Run bomber plant measured 3 200 feet long, over half a mile, by 280 feet wide. The main assembly building alone covered 67 acres under one roof. If you stood at one end, the opposite wall disappeared into haze. The facility required its own power plant, its own water treatment, its own fire department. It consumed enough electricity daily to power a city of 175,000 people. Construction crews worked 24-hour shifts through brutal Michigan winter. They poured 18 million cubic feet of concrete. They erected 9,600 tons of structural steel. They installed 11 miles of overhead conveyor systems. The building's footprint exceeded that of 45 football fields placed side by side. Henry Ford himself, then 78 years old, visited the site on March 12, 1941, walking the length of the main bay despite doctors' orders to rest his weak heart. He stopped halfway, calculated mentally, then announced to Sorensen, "We'll hit maximum capacity by June 1943. Sir, the Air Force says the Air Force builds 20 bombers monthly. We'll build 20 daily." Ford turned, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous empty space. "That's what they can't imagine, Charles. Scale." But imagination and execution occupied different universes. The first B-24 rolled off Willow Run's line on September 10, 1942, 9 months after the Pearl Harbor attack that made bomber production desperately urgent. Sorensen stood beside Army inspectors as they examined the aircraft, clipboards ready, expressions skeptical. Flight Lieutenant Marcus Webb from Sacramento, California, circled the bomber slowly, running his hand along riveted seams. Webb had 12 years aircraft maintenance experience. He'd personally supervised construction of 47 B-17 Flying Fortresses at Boeing's Seattle plant, using traditional methods, small teams, master craftsmen, individual assembly. He stopped at the nose section, peering closely at a rivet pattern. His finger traced an alignment that wasn't quite flush, then another, then 6 more. "Mr. Sorensen," Webb said carefully, "this won't fly." "Why not?" 1,600 misaligned rivets in the nose section alone, panel gaps exceeding tolerance by 3/32 of an inch in 47 locations. Hydraulic lines crossed incorrectly behind the bomb bay. Electrical conduits routed through structural stress points. Webb pulled his cap off, wiped his forehead. "Sir, your workers don't know what they're doing." Sorensen's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Tear it apart, find everything wrong." They found 2 847 defects. The second B-24, completed October 3rd, had 2 203 defects. The third had 1 891. Between September 1942 and March 1943, 6 months, Willow Run produced only 56 aircraft. The Air Force had projected 450. Newspapers began calling the factory "Will It Run" and "Will It Ever Run?" Critics demanded Ford return the massive government contracts to experienced aviation companies. Senator Harry Truman's investigating committee scheduled hearings on waste and inefficiency in defense manufacturing. Charles Sorensen spent those months sleeping 4 hours nightly on a cot in his office, reviewing defect reports until his eyes burned. The production line employed 22 Wonzeron workers. By December 1942, but most had never seen an airplane before their first shift. Farm girls from Iowa, factory workers from Detroit's automotive plants, Appalachian coal miners seeking better wages. They'd been trained on specific tasks, drilling these 4 holes, installing these 6 bolts, but didn't understand how their work integrated into the larger aircraft. Traditional aircraft manufacturing used master mechanics who understood entire assemblies. They could identify problems, adapt solutions, ensure proper fit. Ford's system used semi-skilled labor performing repetitive specialized tasks, fast, efficient, standardized for cars, disastrous for bombers, where one misaligned hydraulic fitting could cause in-flight catastrophe. The breaking point came February 8, 1943. Mildred Miller, 19 years old, from Hillsdale, Michigan, worked Station 47 on the fuselage line, installing oxygen system check valves. She performed this exact task 38 times per shift, every shift, for 4 months. Install valve, torque fitting, inspect seal, move to next aircraft, install valve, torque fitting, inspect seal. On February 8th, during the 11 p.m. shift, she noticed something wrong with aircraft tail number 427127. The oxygen manifold mounting bracket was canted 7 degrees from vertical, barely visible but wrong. She'd installed 4 104 valves by then. She knew what right looked like. She pulled the emergency stop cord. The entire assembly line, half a mile of synchronized production, ground to halt. Klaxons wailed, Supervisors came running, furious. Stopping the line cost approximately $2, $0 per minute in lost production. "Who stopped the line?" shouted shift supervisor Frank Kowalski. Mildred raised her hand, terrified. "The bracket's wrong, sir. I couldn't install the valve properly." "Then skip it. Let quality control catch it at the end." "But sir, what if they don't? What if this plane flies with bad oxygen? What if the crew—" "That's not your job." Sorensen arrived 16 minutes later, awakened from his office cot. He examined the bracket himself, measuring with calipers. 6. 8 degrees off vertical. Within stated tolerance barely. Most inspectors wouldn't catch it. But Mildred was right. Over time, vibration would loosen the valve, potentially causing oxygen failure at 25,000 feet over Germany. He turned to Kowalski. "Miss Miller, how long have you worked this station?" 4 months, sir." "How many valves have you installed?" "I counted once, about 400. Sorensen nodded slowly. Then he did something nobody expected. He pulled a whistle from his pocket, a Ford factory foreman's whistle, and handed it to Mildred Miller. "Keep this. Anytime you see something wrong, anything, blow it. Stop the line immediately. No questions asked." "Sir, I'm just a—" "You're the expert at Station 47. You've installed more oxygen valves than any inspector in the Air Force. Trust your hands." Then Sorensen did something more radical. Over the next 2 weeks, he distributed 214 whistles to workers throughout Willow Run, one for every station on the assembly line. He gathered them in the cafeteria during shift changes and made the same speech. "You know your station better than anyone, better than me, better than the generals. You see problems we can't see. From now on, you're not just workers, you're quality inspectors. You see something wrong, blow the whistle, stop everything, we fix it right there, right then. No more pushing bad work downstream." The Air Force liaison, Colonel Richard Patterson, pulled Sorensen aside afterward. "You just gave production line authority to teenagers and housewives. You're insane." "Colonel, what's insane is thinking generals know more about riveting than riveters." The first week after whistle distribution, workers stopped the line 89 times. Production fell to 3 aircraft. Patterson nearly had Sorensen removed. The second week, 47 stops, 6 aircraft. The third week, 23 stops, 11 aircraft. By the 6th week, stops dropped to 8 per shift. But each stop caught genuine defects that would have caused failures. And something unexpected happened. Defect rates on completed aircraft plummeted. From 203 defects per plane in October to 847 in March to 392 in April. Workers who understood they had authority to stop production became obsessed with getting it right the first time. Nobody wanted to blow the whistle and face their supervisor, but everyone absolutely would if they saw something dangerous. The social pressure to perform quality work exceeded any amount of supervisor yelling. Then Sorensen implemented the second revolution, modular sub-assembly. Traditional aircraft construction built planes sequentially: install frame, add skin, route wiring, install systems, attach engines. Each step waited for the previous step's completion. One bottleneck paralyzed everything downstream. Sorensen broke the B-24 into 72 major sub-assemblies, each manufactured in separate areas by specialized teams: the nose section, the cockpit module, the bomb bay, wings, tail section, engine nacelles. Each team perfected their specific assembly over and over, building expertise and speed. Then, and this was the genius part, the final assembly line merely connected completed modules. Like snapping together a model airplane, except each piece weighed 3,000 pounds and required 47 precise bolt connections. On the main assembly line, aircraft moved continuously on a track system, stopping at 27 stations for exactly 47 minutes each. Teams performed their specific installations within that window, then the aircraft advanced. No waiting, no confusion, just continuous flow. By July 1943, Willow Run hit rhythm. 25 aircraft monthly became 50, 50 became 102. The factory began operating 24 hours daily, 3 shifts, with 3,700 employees, 42% of them women. Rosie the Riveter wasn't a metaphor at Willow Run. She was Dorothy Richardson, 28, from Toledo, Ohio, who worked the upper wing assembly team. She was Beverly Jenkins, 22, from Birmingham, Alabama, who operated the nose turret installation station. She was Kazuko Sakai, 31, Japanese-American released from Manzanar internment camp specifically to work at Willow Run, because her pre-war job at Douglas Aircraft made her invaluable. They built bombers that would fly over Japan. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, especially Kazuko, who installed tailgun mounts and occasionally wrote messages in Japanese on the interior bulkheads. For my cousins in Hiroshima. May this war end soon. The physical challenge was brutal. Wings required overhead riveting in cramped spaces. Bomb bay assembly demanded crawling inside dark fuselages with 40-pound rivet guns. Summer temperatures inside the unair-conditioned factory reached 106 degrees Fahrenheit. Winter cold penetrated through the thin metal roof, making bare-handed work agonizing. Injury rates ran high. Smashed fingers. Burns from hot rivets. Falls from scaffolding. In March 1943, riveter Sarah O'Connell from Boston, Massachusetts, fell 18 feet from a wing assembly platform, breaking both legs. 4 months later, she returned, requesting assignment to ground-level work. She spent the rest of the war installing landing gear assemblies. Why come back? A reporter asked her in November 1944. My brother's in the 8th Air Force flying B-24s over Germany. Maybe he's flying one I built. I'll be damned if I let him down. By August 1944, Willow Run achieved what Commander Yamamoto had declared impossible. One B-24 Liberator completed every 59 minutes. The production line looked like mechanical choreography. At Station 1, fuselage sections arrived via overhead conveyor. At Station 3, wing assemblies descended from the upper fabrication mezzanine, positioned by precision cranes. At Station 9, 4 Pratt & Whitney R1830 engines, each weighing 450 pounds, were mounted simultaneously by specialized crews using custom lifting fixtures. At Station 15, electrical systems went live for the first time, 47 switches, 200 feet of wiring, 37 separate circuits. At Station 19, hydraulic systems pressurized. At Station 23, bomb bay mechanisms tested. At Station 27, the completed bomber, olive drab paint still drying, rolled onto the test runway. Total time from Station 1 to Station 27, 21 hours, 13 minutes. Test pilots from the Air Force Transport Command flew each aircraft immediately, checking control surfaces, engine performance, landing gear operation. Out of every 100 aircraft, 97 flew perfectly on first attempt. The remaining 3 required minor adjustments, a hydraulic leak, a radio malfunction, fixed within hours. By September 1944, Willow Run employed 331 workers operating continuously. The factory maintained its own medical clinic staffing 38 doctors and nurses, its own cafeteria serving 45,000 meals daily. Its own bus service running 67 routes to transport workers from Detroit and surrounding counties. The parking lot covered 92 acres and accommodated 18,500 vehicles. When shifts changed, the traffic jam stretched 7 miles down E-Course Road. Inside the factory, noise was overwhelming. Rivet guns hammered continuously, creating a metallic thunder that made conversation impossible without shouting. Workers wore ear protection, but many suffered permanent hearing damage. The smell was distinctive: hot aluminum, aviation fuel, hydraulic fluid, and fresh paint mixing into an industrial perfume that permeated clothing and skin. Young mechanics fresh from training often experienced sensory overload their first week. The size, the noise, the speed of the moving assembly line. It was mechanical violence, beautiful and terrifying. Lieutenant James Harrington, 24, from Portland, Oregon, arrived in September 1944 as one of the test pilots. He'd flown 28 combat missions over France in 1943, been shot down twice, and survived both times in B-24s built at Consolidated Aircraft's San Diego plant. Traditional construction, hand-fitted by master craftsmen. His first day at Willow Run, he watched the assembly line in disbelief. "These are built by farm girls and housewives?" "Yes, sir," said the production manager, guiding him through. "They fly." "Better than hand-built ones. Tolerances are tighter. Parts are more standardized. If you damage a wing over Germany, any replacement fits perfectly. Hand-built aircraft." Each one's slightly different. Repairs are guesswork. Harrington flew his first Willow Run B-24 that afternoon, tail number 4450838. He climbed to 10,000 feet over Lake Erie, put the bomber through aggressive maneuvers, tested emergency procedures. When he landed, he found the production manager. "That's the best B-24 I've ever flown, and I've flown 42 of them." "Glad to hear it." "Lieutenant, we built it this morning." Between January 1942 and May 1945, Willow Run produced 685 B-24 Liberator bombers, 47% of all Liberators manufactured during World War II. At peak production in August 1944, they completed 432 aircraft, one every 59 minutes, 24 hours a day, for 31 consecutive days. To put that in perspective, Willow Run alone produced more bombers in 1944 than Italy. France and Japan combined produced aircraft of all types that same year. The numbers became absurd. In March 1945, a single B-24 required 28 tons of aluminum, 200 pounds of copper wiring, 847 square feet of plexiglass, and 500 individual instruments and controls. Willow Run was consuming 14% of America's total aluminum production. The factory's monthly material requirements could have built 650 Sherman tanks or 200 Jeeps. Japanese intelligence eventually confirmed Willow Run's production numbers were accurate. The confirmation came from an unexpected source, their own reconnaissance aircraft. November 1944, a Japanese submarine-launched reconnaissance plane photographed American West Coast facilities. When developed, the images showed San Diego's consolidated aircraft plant, where B-24s sat neatly in rows awaiting delivery, approximately 200 visible aircraft. For comparison, they photographed Willow Run's airfield. The analyst counting aircraft stopped at 847, he recounted. 851. The entire airfield was packed with completed B-24s awaiting delivery to combat units, 1 week's production. Commander Yamamoto, who dismissed the original intelligence report as propaganda, received these photographs in December 1944. He studied them silently for 11 minutes, then wrote in his official assessment log, "We are not fighting an enemy. We are fighting an industrial system that produces weapons faster than we can destroy them. Willow Run alone exceeds our entire aircraft production capacity. Recommend immediate peace negotiations before complete national exhaustion." His superiors ignored the recommendation. Yamamoto committed seppuku in February 1945 rather than participate in what he knew was national suicide. Across the Pacific, workers at Willow Run remained unaware of their strategic impact. They clocked in, performed their specialized tasks, clocked out. They collected $1, so $5 per hour, good wages for 1944, enough to support families save for post-war futures. Dorothy Richardson, the riveter from Toledo, planned to open a beauty parlor after the war. Beverly Jenkins wanted to become a nurse. Kazuko Sakai hoped to reunite with family members still detained on the West Coast. Charles Sorensen intended to retire, finally rest. Maybe write a book about manufacturing theory. None of them understood that their daily work, installing rivets, bolting panels, wiring circuits, represented the most revolutionary manufacturing achievement in human history. They transformed aircraft construction from artisan craft to mass production, creating industrial capacity that Japan, Germany, and Italy combined couldn't match. The strategic impact was undeniable. Every mission over Germany, over Japan, over occupied territories, American bombers appeared in formations that seemed inexhaustible. Luftwaffe fighters shot down 20 B-24s on Monday. Thursday, 30 replacement aircraft arrived. Japanese anti-aircraft destroyed 15 bombers over Tokyo. Next week, 25 new bombers appeared. The Axis powers couldn't sustain losses. Each aircraft destroyed represented months of labor, irreplaceable skilled craftsmen, scarce materials. America replaced losses in hours. The mathematics of attrition became impossible for Germany and Japan. By January 1945, German fighter pilot Hans Müller, 26 years old from Munich, who'd flown 187 combat missions, wrote in his journal, "We shoot down the bombers and more arrive. Always more. My friends are dead. Our planes are gone. The Americans lose 100 bombers, and tomorrow 200 attack us. How do you fight an enemy who treats aircraft like ammunition? The answer, you don't. You endure until exhausted, then surrender. Willow Run's last B-24 rolled off the assembly line on June 28, 1945. Tail number 45-29331. Charles Sorensen stood beside it, 45 years old now, grayer, thinner, exhausted. Workers gathered spontaneously, 12 Wozaran people on the day shift, applauding. Sorensen gave no speech. He simply shook hands with the riveter nearest him, the electrician, the hydraulic specialist, the young woman who installed oxygen valves. He shook 200 hands before his voice cracked and he walked away. Japan surrendered 38 days later. The post-war period was anticlimactic. Ford Motor Company had no use for a bomber factory. Attempts to convert Willow Run to automobile production failed. The building was too large, too specialized. In 1947, Kaiser Frazer Corporation purchased the facility for automobile manufacturing, but that venture collapsed by 1953. Portions of the factory operated sporadically for various purposes: helicopter production during the Korean War, aircraft parts manufacturing, storage. But the vast main assembly building, that half-mile cathedral of American industrial power, sat largely empty. Charles Sorensen retired in 1946, moving to a modest home in Bethesda, Maryland. He consulted occasionally on manufacturing problems, but mostly gardened and played with grandchildren. In 1959, a Ford Company historian interviewed him about Willow Run. "Do you think people understand what was accomplished there?" Sorensen puffed his pipe, considering. "No. They remember the bombers, the missions, the victories. They don't understand that we changed manufacturing forever. We proved you could mass-produce anything. Automobiles, aircraft, eventually computers, spacecraft, anything, if you understood the principles. Modular assembly, specialized labor, continuous flow, quality at the source. Do you wish you'd gotten more credit?" "Credit?" Sorensen laughed. "The credit belongs to Mildred Miller and Dorothy Richardson, and 42 Ilzozer others whose names nobody remembers. I just drew the blueprints." The historian persisted. "But you created the system. I created nothing. Henry Ford created the system in 1913 with the Model T. I just scaled it. The miracle wasn't me. The miracle was a 19-year-old farm girl who'd never seen an airplane before, learning to install oxygen valves so perfectly that she could detect a 7-degree angle error by touch. That's the miracle. Multiply her by 4200 and you get Willow Run." Sorensen died in August 1968, age 87, in his sleep. The New York Times obituary mentioned his role at Ford Motor Company, his development of the moving assembly line, and briefly noted his wartime service. Willow Run received 2 sentences. Most of the workers scattered to ordinary lives. Dorothy Richardson opened her beauty parlor in Toledo. It operated until 1989. Beverly Jenkins became a nurse, working at Birmingham's St. Vincent's Hospital for 38 years. Kazuko Sakai moved to Denver, married, raised 3 children, never mentioned her work at Willow Run except once, to her granddaughter in 1983. "I built airplanes during the war, very large airplanes. In 1977, the bomber plant was demolished, most of it. The front portion survived, converted into a General Motors powertrain facility, but the main assembly building, that half-mile wonder, was razed, the steel sold for scrap, the concrete broken up for road fill. In 1997, a small museum opened in one of the surviving buildings, the Yankee Air Museum. It houses exactly 1 B-24 Liberator, tail number 4444052, one of the few surviving aircraft built at Willow Run. Volunteers maintain it, occasionally fly it to air shows. Tour guides mention that this particular aircraft was built in approximately 21 hours by workers who were mostly women, mostly under 30 years old, many of whom had never held industrial jobs before 1942. Visitors photograph the bomber, impressed by its size, its complexity. They rarely ask, "How was this built?" The answer would astonish them. It was built by a teenage girl from Michigan who could detect a 7-degree angle error by touch. It was built by a Japanese-American woman who'd been interned as a security risk, then released because her riveting skills were irreplaceable. It was built by a 28-year-old from Toledo who wanted to protect her brother flying over Germany. It was built by 42,000 ordinary people who performed extraordinary work, who transformed impossibility into routine, who built one bomber every 59 minutes for 3 years straight, who ended a war through sheer industrial perseverance. Japanese intelligence couldn't believe it. German intelligence couldn't match it. American military planners barely understood it. But it happened. In a half-mile building outside Ypsilanti, Michigan, farm girls and housewives built 8 685 bombers, using tools they'd learned to operate in weeks, maintaining quality that exceeded handcrafted aircraft built by master craftsmen with decades of experience. That's not propaganda. That's not mythology. That's documented historical fact, verified by production records, confirmed by surviving aircraft, proven by enemy intelligence reports that deemed it impossible. Charles Sorensen was right. The miracle wasn't the system. The miracle was Mildred Miller and 42,000 others who made the system work, who stopped the assembly line when something was wrong, who installed oxygen valves 100 times until they knew right from wrong by feel alone, who built bombers better than anyone thought possible. They received no medals, no recognition. Most died in obscurity, their contribution forgotten. But somewhere in the Pacific Theater, a B-24 crew survived a mission because their oxygen system worked flawlessly at 25,000 feet, because a teenage girl in Michigan had refused to install a valve on a misaligned bracket, because she'd blown a whistle and stopped a half-mile assembly line rather than let inferior work reach the sky. That crew never learned her name. They never knew who built their aircraft. They flew home, completed their tours, returned to normal lives. But they lived because someone cared enough to blow the whistle. If this story moved you, if it made you realize how ordinary people accomplished the extraordinary, do something right now. Hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel. These stories disappear when people stop engaging with them. The men and women who built Willow Run are gone. Their factory is demolished. Only their legacy remains, and only if we remember it. Drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us if your grandmother worked in a war factory. Tell us if you know stories like this from your own family. From Texas to Taiwan, from Portugal to the Philippines, these stories connect us all. Thank you for watching. Thank you for keeping these forgotten heroes alive.